So welcome everyone. We've just been informed that the session has been sort of extended by 10 minutes in the main assembly hall. So that might affect the number of people in the room for now. So we sort of give another 5 minutes and then we can begin. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, a very warm welcome to this official side event titled Descent Based Discrimination Across Borders, Caste and Equality from South Asia to the Diaspora. My name is Mary James Gill. I'm the Executive Director of Center for Law and Justice, and it's my honor to moderate today's dialogue. This discussion underscores a critical human rights challenge, caste-based discrimination that persists not only in South Asia, but also across global diaspora, shaping access to rights, dignity, and opportunities. Today, we amplify voices from international mechanisms, academia, and community leadership who are confronting this issue heads-on. Thank you to our co-sponsors, Dignity Initiative, Shri Guru Ravidass Sabha Sydney, Dr. Ambedkar International Mission Australia, and to the UN Forum on Minority Issues and its Secretariat for hosting us today. We'll begin with our distinguished speakers, followed by a brief Q&A session. To begin, it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Ashwini KP, UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism. Dr. Ashwini has played a key role in bringing global focus to descent-based discrimination and its intersection with race. We'll now listen to her recorded video statement.
Excellencies, esteemed delegates, distinguished panelists, and dear comrades. It is a privilege to address this vital side event at the United Nations Forum on Minority Issues, where we confront the enduring realities of descent-based discrimination in all its global manifestations. Today, I speak to the urgency of recognizing and remedying caste-based oppression, both within South Asia and as it traverses borders, shaping the lived experiences of diaspora communities affected by caste and descent-based discrimination. Caste and descent-based discrimination is a system of historical exclusion, systemic discrimination bound by stigma, prejudice, and violence that violates your fundamental rights and human dignity as recognized by the United Nations Human Rights Legal Framework. The Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination's General Recommendation 29 makes it clear that dissent covers caste and analogous systems of inherited status, sending a strong message that this form of discrimination is prohibited under the international human rights law. These norms impose obligations on states to prevent, prohibit, and readdress caste based discrimination in all spheres of life, including where it is imported into diaspora setting through migration and transnational network. Research and testimonial evidence including in countries of immigration, documents how caste-based exclusions persist far from their origin, impacting education, workplaces, housing, marriage, and community life. Young people belonging to caste oppressed communities in the diaspora report bullying, social segregation, and, in several instances, threats when they attempt to challenge caste hierarchies. In higher education and technological sector, there are emerging cases of discrimination in recruitment, promotion, and everyday interaction. The landmark Cisco case in California exemplifies these realities, wherein a Dalit engineer testified that dominant caste supervisors denied him promotion and created a hostile work environment due to his caste identity. And this case became a watershed moment, revealing how caste hierarchies operate in global corporations. These harms are often rendered invisible by institutional silence, lack of data, and assumption that caste is a socio-cultural rather than a public human rights concern. Yet, the evidence is clear. Wherever South Asian communities settle, caste discrimination travels with them, affecting access to opportunity, dignity, and justice. In this context, the UN guidance tool on descent-based discrimination calls for holistic responses, ex- explicit legal prohibitions, disaggregated data collection, independent complaint mechanisms, and public education to dismantle stereotype and impunity. And they remind us that persons targeted on the basis of caste-based um, or descent-based discrimination are frequently in the system of constant threat and constant intimidation, and at the same time facing overlapping discrimination linked to gender, class, religion, migration status, and disability. For women, girls, and gender diverse persons from caste oppressed communities, this often translates into compounded exposure to gender based violence, economic exploitation, and exclusion from decision making spaces, including in that of diaspora communities. While the world focuses on sustainable development goals, dissent and caste based discrimination do not reflect comprehensively within the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development and its central pledge to leave no one behind. Goal 1, 4, and 10 on poverty eradication, quality education, and reduced inequalities cannot be achieved without addressing the structural barriers that dissent and caste based discrimination creates. Caste affects one fifth of the world's population, yet it remains largely invisible in development discourse, including that of SDG. States affected by dissent and caste discrimination therefore must develop specific indicators, collect disaggregated data, and implement targeted intervention to ensure equitable progress for caste affected communities. Excellencies, the task ahead is clear. Member states, UN entities, and civil society groups must work together to bring caste and descent based discrimination fully into the core of anti racism, minority rights, and equality agenda discourse at the global level. Most importantly, there is a need for an explicit legal recognition of caste as a protected ground under all forms of anti discrimination law within the United Nations legal framework. In addition, we must create mechanisms for corporate accountability, ensuring that technological companies and multinational employers embed caste into diversity, equity, and inclusion policies not as an afterthought, but as a core axis of identity and oppression. We must strengthen data and monitoring through disaggregated data collection and SDG indicators that make caste affected communities visible in development planning and human rights reporting. And we must prioritize survivor centered advocacy by establishing standing complaint mechanisms, independent investigations, and outreach to diaspora communities, centering the voice and leadership of those affected by caste and descent based discrimination. Only by taking these concrete steps can we ensure that the promises of international human rights law become lived realities for communities who are historically oppressed in their journey of achieving equality, liberty, and justice. Thank you. Excellencies, esteemed delegates.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini, for situating caste so clearly within the global anti-racism agenda. Our next speaker is Dr. Chinsung Chung, independent expert member of the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Her extensive work has advanced CERD's interpretation that descent-based discrimination, including caste, is prohibited under international human rights law. Dr. Chung, it's such an honor to meet you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Excellencies and distinguished panelists, dear participants, it is a privilege to speak today about one of the most enduring yet least acknowledged forms of racial discrimination at this forum as a side event of the UN Forum on Minorities. As Madam Moderator said, I am now the third member, but I have worked at the subcommission on the promotion and protection of human rights and wrote a report on principles and guidelines for elimination of elimination of discrimination based on work and descent in 2004 to 2007. Yeah, the UN Forum on Minority should provide a platform for states, experts, and minority communities to examine how minorities contribute to resilient, peaceful, and inclusive societies. Under Agenda Item 2, recognizing the full contribution of minorities to the economic, social, cultural, political, and institutional fabric of society, we discuss Dalit communities despite caste and descent discrimination. Dalit communities, despite systematic exclusion, have been central in generating research, evidence, civic engagement, institutional reform, and human rights innovation, both in South Asia and across the global diaspora. Thus, discrimination based on work and descent is not confined to any single reason or religion. It manifests in Asia among Dalits and other caste-affected groups in India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and among the Buraqmin in Japan. And in Africa, in Middle East, in Latin America, and across Europe, there are Roma, Sinti, and Traveler peoples, and even in diaspora context, as the Special Rapporteur discussed, diasporic contexts such as the UK and United States and Australia, caste-based exclusion persists in workplace and university. Despite their diversity, these experiences share one common thread. Inherited status determines social worlds, and the cycle of stigma and exclusion passes relentlessly from one generation to the next, often intertwined with the notions of purity and pollution. Today, I'm asked to focus on Nepal and Australia, which would be reviewed at the upcoming UPR. Nepal is one of the countries which has the most serious problems of discrimination based on work and descent, and Australia has large diaspora communities, including Indian Dalit people, but has achieved legal improvement on the discrimination based on work and descent recently. So first, Nepal. Dalits in Nepal have long suffered from caste discrimination. The following are only a part of that discrimination. the structural and systematic nature of the caste discrimination. And second, weak enforcement, judicial bias, and impunity. And limited access to justice for intersectional groups, and widespread socioeconomic exclusion, and educational and employment barriers, and health inequalities and weak social protection, and severe marginalization of Dalit women and the most excluded subcaste, marginalized subcaste including Badi, Mushahar, and communities affected by bonded labor systems. And we find there are emerging concerns. Online caste-based hate speech is increasing, often targeting Dalit women and human rights defenders. Dalit migrant workers face caste-biased recruitment and exploitation abroad. Many Dalit settlements lie in environmentally vulnerable areas, highlighting climate changes. Nepal lacks comprehensive caste disaggregated data across sectors, hindering evidence-based policymaking. It is unfortunate we cannot find remarkable improvement in all aspects, including legal parts in Nepal. And I move to Australia. Dalit diaspora community in Australia have faced multiple and intersectional discrimination within caste system and in Australian society as a whole. Important point here is that the caste discrimination interacts with socio-economic discrimination of the whole society. Very happily, we confirm that in recent years, Australia has taken significant steps toward acknowledging and addressing caste-based discrimination within its multicultural society. I welcome the 2024 National Anti-Racism Framework, which formally recognized caste-based discrimination as an intersectional form of racial discrimination. Recommendation 17 of the National Anti-Racism Framework, calling for the Australian government to explore legal protections, including through reform of the Racial Discrimination Act 1975. And most recently, the 2025 dedicated federal complaints pathway established by the Australian Human Rights Commission for caste-oppressed communities. I learned that these historic developments were made possible by the pioneering grassroots research and advocacy led by Ambedkar International Mission and Shri Guru Ravidass Sabha and the author Dr. Asang. And the study captured a huge number of testimonies documenting a spectrum of caste-based harms from microaggression and exclusion to untouchability practices, social boycott, discrimination in employment and education, and cases of physical assault. It reveals that caste-based discrimination exists in Australia today, especially within diaspora's social structures, and disproportionately harms Dalit women, workers, international students, and children. Australia's experience demonstrates how caste hierarchies persist across borders and can be reproduced within diaspora communities when host countries lack explicit legal or policy recognition of descent-based discrimination. The Australian example illustrates how international human rights standards on descent can be effectively translated into domestic and racism policies. even in countries where caste is not historically present but emerged through migration. This model can inform work on caste and analogous descent-based systems in South Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and diasporic settings worldwide. At this point, I will join a call to action strengthening legal protection in Australia. Having recognized caste as a form of racial and descent-based discrimination and having opened federal complaint pathways, the next logical and necessary step for Australia is to align national legislation with the interpretation. I therefore encourage Australia to amend Section 9(1) of the Racial Discrimination Act 1975 to explicitly include caste as a protected ground, and such an amendment would provide legal certainty to victims and duty bearers and consolidate the important progress already initiated through the National Anti-Racism Framework and the AHRC's 2025 complaint mechanisms. As caste becomes increasingly visible in global diaspora context, there is a growing need for government, national human rights institutions, and UN bodies to adopt proactive evidence-based measures grounded in community participation and third long-standing jurisprudence on descent-based discrimination. As a third member, I take this opportunity to emphasize the CERD General Recommendation 29 made in 2002 on discrimination based on descent, the state review procedure, and early warning and urgent action procedure could be good tools for the research and movement. And there are also many other UN mechanisms and regional mechanisms, including principles and guidelines. I emphasize again my work. Principles and guidelines for effective elimination of discrimination based on work and descent of 2007, and policy paper of UN Women this year, and Resolution 619 of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for reaffirming that caste discrimination is a matter of binding international obligations, and it is heartening to get mentioned Pakistan, because we hardly, within caste conversations, Pakistan is hardly mentioned, but thanks to our advocacy, that now it's part of the discussion. And caste has many manifestations, and in Pakistan it manifests in religion and certain minority communities that are marginalized in caste. And also that came up in your conversation, that how forced labor, and because occupation is another marker of caste along with birth, it means that certain communities are still into bonded labor, and it means that those communities who have been historically marginalized by caste, they still exist, and there's more reason to talk about it. And before we move to our next speaker, I'd like to announce that Special Rapporteur on Minorities, Professor Nicolas Levrat, he'll be joining us at 1:45. And I'll now move next to, and I'll invite Dr. Asang Wankhede. He's University of Oxford researcher and policy and advocacy lead with the Ambedkar International Mission. He leads pioneering work on caste discrimination in Australia, highlighting how caste hierarchies travel with migration and shape new labor and social landscapes. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Excellencies, colleagues and friends, thank you for being here this afternoon. I would like to begin by narrating a testimony of untouchability told to me by a Dalit mother in Sydney. And I quote her, "Our children, Dalit children, are prohibited from joining at the same time as other children and are made to wait outside of the place where ritual is undertaken. This is the scenario where they were invited for a birthday party. They know they means the Savarnas or the upper caste groups, which caste we belong to. That's how they think we are polluting. We are untouchables. If we attend their rituals, they and the ritual will get defiled or polluted. I would like to also begin by acknowledging the leadership of the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, and along with his staff commissioners who have shown principled commitment to recognizing caste discrimination in Australia. Their receptiveness and willingness to listen to our voices have been instrumental in opening a historical chapter, not only for Australia, but for global anti-caste human rights practice. As the lead author of the report, Caste in Australia, a phenomenology of casteism, I stand before you not to restate what Australian developments were. I want to speak about something broader. I want to share what the Australian experience teaches us about the global challenges of caste and descent-based discrimination and the role minorities can play in institutional reform. Caste is not confined to South Asia. It travels, it adapts. It embeds itself in diaspora communities, in institutions that may have not even recognized its existence, and in societies that imagine themselves as caste benign. In Australia, our study documented discrimination ranging from exclusion and microaggressions to practices of untouchability, social boycott, and even physical violence because of caste. These patterns are recognizable to any Dalit or person from the communities discriminated based on work and descent, anywhere else across the world as well, be it Nepal, UK, Middle East, or even South America. This study informed us that caste and descent-based discrimination is a transnational system of descent-based discrimination and hierarchy that reproduces itself wherever people migrate. It follows people, and therefore human rights and anti-discrimination protection must also follow them. The foundation of this research is based on leading methodology in the field of social sciences, and I will not go too much into detail. But Excellencies, I strongly believe that this evidence-based, grassroots-led research could be a best practice to address caste discrimination in global diaspora. Lived experiences of minorities are not marginalized voices. Our voices are empowered voices because we centered our lived experiences on the foundation of knowledge generation and finding the reality of casteism. If caste discrimination is global, then the reach of anti-discrimination measures should also be global to cover those diaspora communities where caste discrimination prevails and is practiced. This vision is grounded in human rights-based approach, aligned with CERD, CEDAW, ICCPR, the Durban Declaration, and the UN Framework on Minority Rights. It is not grounded in politics. It is grounded in acceptance of the problem and a call for collaborative and collective action. In this consequentialist argument that I'm making, I attempt to counter the opposition to the recognition of caste and descent-based discrimination within the CERD framework and broadly within the international human rights law framework by a few member states, unfortunately. The opposition to the recognition question is unfounded, according to me, as the premise of the logic of such opposition is that caste is not race. It is only a domestic problem and not an issue outside of spatial geographical location, that is South Asia. The autonomy of normative foundations of international human rights law is not dependent on domestic legal formulations. Though they are, of course, reified mostly from state practice, the domestic implementation of the ratified international law norms is a duty on the states. In this regard, General Recommendation 29, as Professor Chung also mentioned, of the CERD committee, did not, on caste and analogous forms of descent-based discrimination, did not equate caste and race as the same thing. What it correctly did was point out that racial discrimination is just not about race. Racial discrimination is a broader umbrella which encompasses other enumerated grounds of color, descent, or national or ethnic origin under Article 1 of CERD. The approaches in international human rights law to recognize caste and descent-based discrimination under the living instrument doctrine is therefore to not equate semantics, but rather exactly do what the Constitution of India enacted in 1950, 15 years before the CERD Convention, and other constitutions have done so before the CERD Convention, is that they have an anti-discrimination law with list of grounds. When looked at from this perspective, what I theorize as an outcome-oriented approach, that the attempts by anti-caste actors, UN treaty bodies, governments outside of South Asia is to achieve legal protection to what was recognized 75 years ago in Indian Constitution and other constitutions. That is, to prohibit caste in foreign lands where it has now become a reality due to the export of discriminatory attitudes with migration, as strong empirical evidence indicates. This claim is not rhetorical, but is grounded in solid facts. The Australian process of undertaking policy reform through rigorous human rights evidence architecture strengthens this argument by plainly stating that it need not be a controversy to extend protections of anti-discrimination laws to any multicultural group that faces discrimination in diaspora. This is not a personal attack on any particular dominant community or a particular country, but a process of reclaiming the fundamental human rights of Dalit people. We refuse to be excluded, we refuse to be discriminated and treated as unequals. Our human rights issues cannot remain contested. When Dalit communities organize, produce evidence, and assert their dignity, when the voices of the oppressed are centered, the policy transforms. And when a country takes caste seriously, it encourages other countries to do so. To conclude, the argument and the argumentation and the project that I've just envisioned today and outlined before you is a project of counterclaim. It's a counterclaim to the very dominant knowledge-producing forces that, at their very whim, can allow or disallow the language of caste itself to create the meaning of the social and also the reality which suits the hegemonic project of deciding what is to be known and what is to be unknown. This meta-contest must be fought and contested with truth and truth alone of our voices and of our lived experiences. In the end, I will conclude with two recommendations. First, I call upon member states to follow the Australian example and undertake empirical evidence-based policy recognition of caste discrimination. And finally, I urge the UN to promote evidence-based interventions on caste discrimination outside of South Asia in diaspora communities. I thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing diaspora realities into focus through data and lived experiences. And now, further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Ajay, is he with us? Dr. Ajay Niranjane from the Ambedkar International Mission Australia. His work centers on strengthening diaspora networks for anti-caste justice and building Ambedkar society beyond borders. Dr. Ajay, thank you very much for joining us. Over to you. I'd like to request the technician that he may be unmuted so that he can speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished experts, colleagues, and friends, Jai Bhim. It's an honor to address you today at an official side event of the United Nations Forum on Minority Issues. I speak today on behalf of community organization working across borders to advance dignity, equality, and protection from descent-based discrimination, including Ambedkar International Mission Australia and the Shri Ravidass Sabha, Sydney. Our theme could not be more urgent. Caste is not confined by geography, and I can reconfirm some of the statements made by Dr. Asang and also Dr. Ashwini and Dr. Chinsung, that these are very well accepted. The caste has, when people migrate, inherited disadvantages migrate as well. Discrimination based on descent now appears in workplaces, housing markets, educational institutions, and community spaces across the diaspora. This is neither anecdotal nor isolated. It is a structural. We are particularly grateful to today's distinguished panel for anchoring this conversation in international law and lived reality. We appreciate the leadership of Professor Nicolas Levrat, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, whose mandate underscores that minority protection is inseparable from equality before the law. We thank Dr. Ashwini KP, Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, for framing descent-based discrimination squarely within global anti-racism efforts. We also acknowledge Dr. Chinsung Chung, independent expert of CERD, for reminding us that treaty obligations must translate into enforceable protections on the ground. From the evidence base, we value Dr. Asang Wankhede's work in building policy-relevant research on caste in the diaspora, and we are grateful to Mr. Rup Sunar for bringing a grounded perspective from civil society advocacy in Nepal. In early 2024, our community in Australia undertook a national consultation on caste discrimination in Australia, supported by the Federation of Ethnic Communities Council of Australia. Participants, and as I repeat, I think what Asang has just started his speech with, spoke of barriers to employment, exclusion in housing and education, social intimidation, and fear of reprisal when reporting abuse. A consistent finding was not only the presence of discrimination, but the absence of remedies, a legal vacuum that leaves victims unsure where to turn. This leads to a simple diplomatic proposition. We cannot address a harm that the law does not name. So recognition must be precise and practical. It should include explicit references to caste or descent, inequality, and anti-discrimination frameworks, guidance for employers, educators, and public bodies, confidential reporting channels and whistleblower protections, and a data collection that respects privacy while revealing pattern of harm. We are not here to stigmatize cultures or communities. We are here to uphold universal standards. Equality does not threaten identity. It protects humanity. Addressing caste as a global human rights concern is not divisive. It is unifying because it affirms that all persons are born equal in dignity and rights. International engagement matters. When United Nations mechanisms illuminate blind spots, domestic systems evolve. When communities are heard, policy improves. Today's dialogue is therefore not ceremonial. It's catalytic. It invites states, institutions, and civil society to move from acknowledgement to implementation. Allow me to close with 3 commitments we respectfully seek from this forum and from all partners. First, name the harm. Include caste and descent-based discrimination explicitly in law and policy. Second, strengthen remedies. Ensure access to justice through clear pathways and protections. And third, invest in awareness. Develop guidance, training, research to prevent harm before it occurs. We thank special rapporteurs and experts for their engagement, and we reaffirm our readiness to collaborate with the governments, United Nations bodies, and civil society to convert principle into practice. Let me end with this. Caste is not destiny. Caste is not divine. Caste is not normal. Caste is a system, and system can be dismantled, but only if the world chooses to see them. Today, the world is listening, and today, our community is no longer whispering. We are speaking. Thank you. Jai Bhim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for reminding us Ambedkar's global message of equality and emancipation, and your words sound so loud and clear that it's not a divine system and it must be dismantled. And 2 very important things, that we need to name the problem, and as Dr. Chung already mentioned, that it has been mentioned clearly under anti-racism framework, which is a big win for us. But it's also important to listen to the people who suffer every day from it, and not just from academics, and the research is really important, but listening to also what Dr. Ajay referred, that we need to bring those people for whom caste is a lived reality. It's an everyday experience. And it's a great honor for me to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Rup Sunar, who's the chairperson of Dignity Initiative. He's a dedicated movement builder advancing the rights of caste oppressed people in Nepal through legal advocacy, community mobilization, and strategic partnerships. And he's also one of Dignity Initiative, also one of the leading partners for the side event. So, Mr. Sunar, it's an honor to have you with us. Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Professor Nicolas Levrat, Special Rapporteur on Racism, Dr. Ashwini, KP, distinguished member of the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Dr. Chinsung Chung, and Dr. Asang Wankhede, and most importantly, dear participants. I would like to refer this issue as a caste-based discrimination rather than using the broader term descent-based discrimination. While descent-based discrimination captures certain elements of hierarchy, it often overlooks a crucial and defining element of the caste system, that is untouchability. Untouchability is not merely about social exclusion. It is a form of systemic, ritualized, and historically entrenched oppression that has targeted Dalits and other marginalized groups for centuries. By naming the issue accurately as caste-based discrimination, we recognize the unique form of stigma, segregation, and denial of rights that come with it. Nepal has often been highlighted at international forums for its strong normative frameworks. Our constitution has accepted Dalit as a political identity and considered caste-based discrimination as the serious social crime. Dalit rights are also protected as the fundamental rights in the constitution itself. In addition to this, there is a constitutional commission that is called National Dalit Commission, which is mandated to look after Dalit issues. The mixed electoral system also played a significant role to bring Dalit representatives in the political forefront. There is also an anti-caste discrimination law since 2011. However, Dalits continue to face caste-based discrimination in their daily lives. Article 40 of the Constitution guarantees proportional representation in state bodies, free education, land and housing rights for landless and homeless Dalit, as well as access to healthcare, social justice, and social security. Yet, even 10 years down the line, Constitution was promulgated, the government has not enacted legislation to implement these constitutional commitments. Despite the enforcement of anti-caste discrimination law, Dalits still struggle to register first information reports, that is called FIRs. Implicit and explicit biases persist within law enforcement and the judiciary. As a result, out of 144 caste discrimination cases filed in the district court over the period of 1 decade, 63 resulted in acquittals. And 79 Dalits have been killed since the law was implemented, and surprisingly, most perpetrators remain unpunished. The discrimination has increasingly shifted to the digital domain, where social media offers both opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, digital platforms have provided a level playing field to amplify our voices, raise awareness, and mobilize support for marginalized communities. On the other hand, they have become a breeding ground for hatred, hate speech, and targeted harassment. Dalits in particular continue to face cyberbullying, threats, exclusion, and attempts to silence their online activism. This digital hostility mirrors offline caste-based discrimination, demonstrating that systemic biases are now being reproduced and amplified in online spaces. Discrimination also persists within diaspora community, where caste-based biases continue to influence social interactions, community participation, and access to opportunities. Dalits and other marginalized groups often face social exclusion, stereotyping, and subtle forms of prejudices even in countries where legal protections exist. Online spaces and community networks abroad sometimes replicate the same hierarchies and discriminatory attitudes, limiting the ability of Dalit to fully engage in cultural, educational, and professional activities. This underscores that the caste-based discrimination is not confined to national borders. It travels with communities and continues to affect lives across the globe, highlighting the urgent need for awareness, advocacy, and protective measures. I would like to share the story of Prem Pariyar, who defied caste-based discrimination. After experiencing caste discrimination, he advocated for legal recognition of caste discrimination in universities. His efforts contributed to the California State University system, adding caste as a protected category in its non-discrimination policy. This ensures that Dalit students would have Dalit student would have a formal protection system. Similarly, in Seattle, the city council passed a historic ordinance in 2023 explicitly banning caste-based discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations, which the Special Rapporteur on Racism has already pointed out in her remarks. Caste-based discrimination is not only a regional problem, it is a global human rights issue. Yet it remains under-recognized in international discussions on equality. Recognizing caste as a form of structural discrimination is essential for ensuring that marginalized communities are included in policymaking, development planning, and human rights mechanism. Today, as we speak across borders, let us commit to build transnational movements. We must connect Dalits and other minority communities across countries to amplify their voices, exchange strategies, and advance collective action for equality, justice, and human rights. By fostering solidarity beyond borders, we can strengthen the fight against caste-based discrimination and ensure that marginalized communities are empowered globally. Advocate for legal recognition. It is essential to work with national and international government to formally recognize caste as a protected category under human rights framework and national laws. Our friends have done it in USA, Canada, Australia, and other countries. Legal recognition is a crucial step to ensure accountability, safeguard rights, and provide marginalized communities with the protection they deserve. Mobilizing international and regional platforms. We must leverage forums like this to intensify conversation about caste on the global stage, raise awareness, and push for action. Sustained advocacy at this level is vital to eradicate caste-based discrimination and ensure that no one lives under the shadow of this injustice. And finally, commitment to action. Beyond dialogue, we must translate awareness into tangible changes through policy reforms, community empowerment, education, and social mobilization, so that caste-based discrimination becomes a relic of past within our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sonar, for highlighting the urgency of institutional recognition and reforms. And we welcome Professor Nicolas Levrat. Please join us over here.
Hello, sorry for coming so late. I'll put that on. Hello. And then Professor Levrat for
we will have only 5 minutes. You want to put flow to Australia? Maybe you can make. Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to welcome Professor Nicolas Levrat, UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues. His mandate focuses on ensuring minority protection aligns with core pillars of equality, identity, and participation. We look forward to your insights, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Naturally, I have to start with apologies. I was supposed to be here earlier, but you've probably realized the condition in which this whole forum is being held are not acceptable. There's nothing we can do now, we're just into it, but there are many logistical agenda problems, so I apologize. I'm trying my best, but it's not very satisfactory. I have the chance to be supported in my mandate by interns who are sitting here, students from the University of Geneva, so they took notes on the discussion and so on. I will be briefed about what has been said. I regret I could not attend because I think this is an extremely important issue and one of the worst cases of systemic discrimination because basically, yes, it's based on, it's not the only one. I mean, nationality is a terrible case of discrimination and nobody talks about it, but one day we'll have to deal with that also. So typically, this is something that is not properly addressed in the UN system, as you all know, because some states manage to avoid a mandate being created to deal with that issue. And so it's not really a minority issue, but it's also a minority issue. It's, yes, we have the angle of racism and so on. It's very, very difficult to tackle it properly. What is also disturbing is that we have that in some societies where you have this entrenched social hierarchy, that we can understand and we can try to work on that. But we realize that even when people move, even in diaspora, we find again this same social hierarchy reproduced, and this is much more problematic. So I'm really convinced that this needs to be addressed, and it's not by chance that my country visit that will be starting next week, beginning of next week, is in Nepal. It's one of the countries where this issue exists. It's one of the countries where there are attempts to deal with the issue. So naturally, because this is what I'm tasked to do, the country visit will be about the situation in Nepal. But I will try, in writing my report to the Human Rights Council, to make it quite clear that this type of situation is not only happening in this country, and it should have relevance beyond the specific case of Nepal. So that's what I'm trying to do to address these issues. And I'm very grateful to the government of Nepal to have accepted the country visits. And I hope it will have an impact. We're actually very short on time because I hope to present this report to the Human Rights Council of March 26. But there are rule of procedure. I have to send back the report to the government and so on. So I really hope it can be discussed in March 26, otherwise it would be March 27, and that's really much too late. So again, I apologize not for being longer here, and yes, please keep sending me information, exchanging, because I really need to better understand these situations.
Thank you, His Excellency. And now we are almost time's up, but would like to hear briefly from Australia, Permanent Mission. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and I just want to say thank you to the panelists for the really insightful. I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists for the really insightful presentations today. The Australian government is committed to combating racism and does not condone racism in any way, and all states should protect people from unfair treatment on the basis of their race, colour, descent, or national or ethnic origin in any field of public life. Caste-based discrimination affects communities right around the world, and this includes in Australia, and it is a really complex and pervasive intersectional form of discrimination. Built off Australian research and with funding from the Australian Government, the Australian Human Rights Commission's National Anti-Racism Framework provides a roadmap to eliminating racism in Australia, and it's already been highlighted today, but importantly, the report recognises caste as an intersectional form of racial discrimination, and it provides recommendations to the Australian Government, including to investigate options for legal protections against caste discrimination. It also highlights how caste-based discrimination goes beyond sort of interpersonal reactions, but it's also something that's affecting systems and institutions. I did have a question, but I know we're short on time, so I will just close by noting that the Australian Government will continue to oppose those who foster hatred or ethnic division, and will combat racism with a zero tolerance approach, including through our anti-discrimination laws and in accordance with our obligations under the CERD. So I just wanted to reiterate our thanks for this really interesting discussion, and thank you.
Thank you. Let me just highlight 3 takeaways. Caste discrimination is a global issue requiring global accountability. Data, law reform, and recognition of diaspora experiences are essential for progress. Centering the voices of caste-affected communities must guide every intervention. So I would like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to our speakers and all of you who have contributed to this important discussion. We look forward to continued collaboration toward a world where caste and descent can never define human worth. Thank you.